Chapter 4, Section 4, the First Amendment, Press and Assembly. First Amendment Jurisprudence. Press. Freedom of the press protects more than journalists. The court has held that the freedom of the press encompasses opinion presented for the public across a variety of platforms and media, including books, magazines, radio, television, blogs, and of course, newspapers. First Amendment jurisprudence concerning the press has traditionally focused on the issue of prior restraint, which is the practice of a government telling a publication what it can print or air. An important case considering prior restraint is New York Times Company v. United States, 1971, in which the Nixon administration tried to stop the New York Times and the Washington Post from publishing the Pentagon Papers, which were classified at the time. The court found that the Nixon administration did not provide sufficient justification that stopping the publication of the leaked papers was a matter of national security, and held that the newspaper's right to publish the leaked documents was protected under the First Amendment. In this decision, the court essentially outlawed prior restraint. Another important issue for the press is libel, which is the printing of false information that is damaging to the reputation of the person or persons identified. In the 1950s and 60s, Southern officials often used threats and libel suits to suppress public reporting on the violent repression of the civil rights movement. The court held that anyone alleging libel would have to prove actual malice, knowingly publishing something false or publishing something with reckless disregard for the truth or falsity of the claims, thus establishing a very high burden of proof. Requiring plaintiffs to prove something as false and prove that the publication knew or should have known it was false was a departure from earlier standards, which had placed the burden of proving truth on the defendant. The court has steadfastly strengthened the protections for the press under the First Amendment. Assembly. The protections on the freedom of assembly have been applied to the states since the 1930s, but they are limited in similar ways to the protections on speech. The government must be content neutral, meaning it cannot prohibit groups from meeting, even if their ideals or statements are generally considered repugnant, as with the Nazi March in Skokie, Illinois in the 1970s. A contemporary example involves the Westboro Baptist Church, a group that often protests at military funerals to express views that are offensive to many people. The court has ruled that the government may impose reasonable restrictions on the time, place, and manner of assemblies. For instance, the government may require groups to have a permit or to make security arrangements for very large gatherings, but the government may not prohibit groups or individuals from assembling based on the content of their message, no matter how objectionable.